This was the third year I'd been my stepbrother's secret lover. I secretly ordered us a set of matching couples rings. When he found them, he didn't let me out of bed all night. The next day, running a high fever, I still had to go play designated drinker for his newly hired secretary. His friend teased him. "I thought he was your precious little thing. You willing to let him go now?" Jason just toyed with my hearing aid and sneered. He needed to be put in his place for getting ideas. Besides, I'm not interested in playing house with a beta. He forgot I was in auditory therapy. My hearing was already back to 30%. Later, he brought me an identical ring and told me to put it on. He froze when he saw the wedding band already on my ring finger. I just nodded. "Sorry, my husband is waiting for me at home." "What is this?" Jason pinched the silver ring between his fingertips. His cold, sharp gaze fixed on me. I reached for it, but he held it up over his head. I knew this was the prelude to one of his rages. So I wrapped my arms around his shoulders. "I just bought it for fun. We had just finished, and my legs were so weak I could barely stand." He was shirtless, and with a single shove, he pushed me back onto the bed. He twisted the ring in his fingers, spotting the letters engraved inside. Clearly etched were our two names, Jason and Leo. That would have been fine on its own, but at the end, I'd asked the engraver to add a Latin word. Amor. Immortal love. He tossed the ring aside, hit the floor with a sharp clink, and I instinctively moved to pick it up, but he lunged, pinning me down and gripping my jaw. The pressure was so intense I let out a muffled groan, which only made him squeeze harder. "So, my dear little brother wants an immortal love with me, does he?" His voice was low and hoarse, dripping with mockery. "Jason, I'm sorry." I apologized, and he let go, shoving my head to the side. I felt helpless, trying to squirm out from under him, but he gave me no chance. The moment I got off the bed, he scooped me up and threw me back down. I was facing away from him, unable to see his expression, but his rough movements quickly left me breathless. My hearing aid, which had fallen out, was shoved forcefully back into my ear. His voice was demonic. "Listen closely. This is how I punish you." He didn't let me go until just before dawn. He threw a blanket over, just enough to cover my body. Then he got up and went to the balcony for a smoke. The click of the lighter carried in on the wind. I curled into a ball under the blanket. Hearing me move, he glanced over his shoulder, his voice frigid. "Don't let those kinds of thoughts happen again, or this won't be your only lesson." I slowly whispered, "I know. Jason and I aren't blood brothers. My mother married into the Grant family when I was 15, bringing me with her. Jason was already 23 at the time. To ensure I could stay in the family without causing trouble, my mother had me on suppressants to hide my identity as an Omega. So, to this day, Jason still thinks I'm a beta. The first time I met him, he had just graduated, and his father was planning to hand over the family corporation to him. Back then, he wasn't as ruthless and decisive as he is now. He came downstairs in casual loungewear. My mother and I were standing awkwardly in the living room. He took a sip of his coffee and shot us a cold glance. Every servant in the house whispered that I was there to get a piece of the family fortune, and that my mother had only married for the money. Jason's eyes scanned my faded, high-water school uniform pants, and he scoffed. "Dragging in any old riffraff now? Aren't you worried about the filth?" I subconsciously tried to pull my pant legs down, but it was useless. I'd heard his mother's funeral had been just a week before my mother and I showed up. You can imagine how much we were despised. He noticed my fidgeting and let out another cold, mocking laugh. My mother forced a smile. "You must be Jason, right? This is your younger brother, Leo. Leo, hurry up and say hello to your brother." Jason's smirk vanished, and his gaze locked onto me. I forced myself to say it. "Brother." I signed it at the same time. He frowned when he heard my voice, then looked down and noticed the cheap hearing aid in my ear. For a moment, he looked stunned, but then his eyes met mine again, and he said, word for word, "I don't have a brother." To defy his father, he started acting out, street racing, getting into fights, hanging out at bars, anything to avoid going to the office. He brought different Omegas home every other day, both men and women. I knew he hated me, so I avoided him at all costs. But during my senior year of high school, I was studying until 2 in the morning. On my way to the bathroom, I stumbled upon him with someone. His door was open, and I had to pass his room to get to the bathroom. The Omega was begging him, but he was just whispering sweet nothings to her. Startled, I bumped into a nearby shelf. Jason immediately called out, "Who's there?" I scrambled away. The next day, his father whipped him. The talk was that he'd brought trash into the house and turned the place into a cesspool. I happened to come home from school just in time to see him kneeling in the living room. His shirt was stained with blood. I meant to just walk away, but I couldn't help but look. Our eyes met. He licked the inside of his cheek, staring at me. A chill ran down my spine, and I fled. But that night, he found me anyway. He cornered me at my bedroom door, releasing a flood of intense pheromones. To avoid giving myself away, I forced myself not to look him in the eye. He looked me up and down, his cool eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and amusement. "That was you last night, wasn't it?" Ran straight to the old man this morning to tattle. "Pretty clever, my dear little brother." I struggled to shut the door, but he blocked it with his hand. He's 6 feet 3 inches, and even though I'd grown, I was still a head shorter than him. It wasn't, I lied, my face straight. He snorted. "No? Then why are you shaking? Or maybe you want a piece of me, too? Too bad. I only like Omegas." He squeezed my shoulder, and I flinched. I couldn't hear anything. He stepped closer, just like the first time we met, and stared into my eyes. "Stop playing the victim. You're just like your mother. Unfortunately for you, I'm not buying it." He patted my cheek. With that, he turned and left. I didn't understand why he'd suddenly come to say all that. But that night, he developed a fever. His pheromones were leaking out. I couldn't sleep, feeling sick myself, until I heard a crash from his room. By the time I went in with protective gear, he was unconscious. "Jason, brother?" I called his name several times. It was only when my voice started to crack like I was about to cry that he finally spoke. "I'm not dead yet. What's with the waterworks?" His voice was horribly hoarse, and the wounds on his back were bleeding again. I forced myself to calm down, dragged him back to his bed. I changed his clothes, applied ointment to his wounds, and gave him fever reducers. "I'm sorry," I told him. He shot me a glare. "What are you babbling about? Don't you think I'm cold?" I then realized I'd put medicine on him but forgotten to cover him with a blanket. It was the middle of winter. After that, Jason never brought another person home again, and his attitude toward me gradually started to improve. When I woke up, again it was already evening. A full day without food, combined with my body's exhaustion, made me unsteady on my feet. I forced myself to get cleaned up and then checked my phone. Not a single message. I searched the bedroom, but the ring was gone too. It was a matching set. The one he'd found was, of course, his size. I pulled the other one out of my bag. It gleamed under the light. I traced the letters engraved inside, and a wave of helplessness and sorrow washed over me. I screwed things up again. It had been a long time since Jason had gotten this angry with me. The last time was when he found out I had a crush on him. He called me disgusting, shameless, a bastard just like my mother. But that very same day, his father and my mother were in an accident. Plane crash. I knew it wasn't right for me to stay in that house anymore, so I left him some money and moved out. It was money my mother had saved for me. Not much, but just enough to pay him back for my living expenses over the years. I never expected to see him again in Austin after I graduated college. But from that day on, he suddenly proposed that I become his lover. In his words, it was just to mess with me. You can't get pregnant anyway, so it's just for fun, right? And yet, he could be incredibly good to me. He bought me the most expensive hearing aids, sent me to auditory therapy, and when he found out I was being rejected for jobs because of my hearing impairment, he would go after each of those companies. Sometimes, he made them disappear entirely. I always wanted to tell him that I could get pregnant, that I could have a child for him. But every time I was about to, he would remind me that I was just a pastime. Just like yesterday. As I was debating whether I should just leave, he called. I tried to stand up but felt dizzy and collapsed back onto the sofa. His voice was cold. "Get over to the Moonlight Club. You're on drinking duty." I was about to say I wasn't feeling well, but he hung up. He hadn't let me touch a drop of alcohol since the time I got drunk while acting as his temporary assistant at an expo. I let out a bitter laugh, figuring this was just another one of his punishments. To appease him, I had no choice but to go. When I got to the club, I felt a chill as soon as I stepped out of the car, but I pushed through and went inside. I found Jason quickly. He was surrounded by men and women, and the chaotic mix of pheromones almost made me gag. The moment they saw me, however, they all instinctively moved away from him. But Jason just waved at his new secretary. "Kyle, come here. You don't have to drink anymore." I stood at the door, and Jason said to me, annoyed, "Leo, what are you standing there for? Go keep them company for Kyle." Across from me was a table full of men spouting vulgar jokes. The Omega named Kyle had a flushed face. He immediately got up when Jason called his name and went over. "Mr. Grant, I can actually still drink," he said, his eyes red. He had a pretty face and fair skin. You could have told me he was a minor celebrity and I'd believe it. I remembered him. I'd seen him interviewing for the job once when I was dropping off documents for Jason. And Jason had interviewed him personally. Jason patted the empty space beside him. "Sit here. Don't let them get you drunk." Kyle sat down cautiously, while I steeled myself and went to take the drinks. Jason didn't look my way once. At first, the men were hesitant to drink with me, but after seeing Jason's attitude, they grew bold. They kept pouring me hard liquor, and some even tried to touch me. When I dodged them, they only became more brazen. A few even started recklessly releasing their pheromones. I was already running a fever and hadn't taken my suppressants, so I was barely holding on. I tried to get up and leave, but Jason shot me a cold glare, his eyes saying, "If you dare walk out, you'll face the consequences." Remembering last night, I was still terrified, so I just sat there and kept drinking. It wasn't until Jason's friend Ryan came in and saw the situation that he rushed over to stop it. "Hey, what's going on? Ganging up on our Leo?" He shot Jason a look, urging him to intervene, but Jason ignored it. As if in defiance, I shook my head at Ryan. "I'm fine." Confused, Ryan went and sat next to Jason. "He's about to pass out. If you don't step in, you'll be taking it too far." Jason gave him a cold glance and continued to drink nonchalantly. Kyle, leaning back on the sofa with his hand on his forehead, tugged on Jason's suit jacket. "Mr. Grant, I don't feel so good." Jason leaned in close, and Kyle cupped his face and suddenly kissed him. "Better now," he whispered, then passed out. No one said a word, and the men at my table prepared to pour me another round. One of the men sitting closest to me reached out with a grin to touch my thigh. Just as his hand was about to make contact, Jason yanked me to my feet. "Are you an idiot? Can't you dodge?" The sudden movement made my head spin. The other men, realizing he was still protective of me, quickly started apologizing. I leaned against him without a word. He looked down at me and I turned my face away. He let out an exasperated laugh. "Leo, you think you have the right to be mad at me?" My eyes started to burn. I suddenly felt so tired. I subconsciously pushed him away, but he just pulled me back into his arms. "We're going home." Ryan ended up being our driver. I thought Jason would just toss me in the back seat, but after he pushed me in, he slid in right next to me. My hearing aid fell out when he threw me into the car. He picked it up and toyed with it in his hand, not bothering to help me put it back on. Ryan saw it in the rearview mirror and chuckled. "Did you get that for him from Germany?" Jason grunted in response. "He's just a pet. Might as well give him nice things." The car was driving smoothly when Ryan suddenly slammed on the brakes. I had no strength to brace myself and lurched forward. Jason quickly put a hand out to block my forehead. His palm was cool, and he paused when it touched my skin. With his other hand on my back, he felt my forehead again. "Why are you so hot?" he muttered. Jason patted my cheek. "Leo?" I really didn't want to open my eyes, and I didn't have the energy to, so I just let my head fall to the other side. "Take us to the hospital first." Jason pulled me onto his shoulder. To the hospital. Now, while he was focused on the road ahead, I secretly popped a suppressant into my mouth, managing to bring my fever down a little. Ryan at the wheel clicked his tongue. Knew you couldn't bear to let him suffer. He found a spot to turn around and head for the hospital. On the way, he noticed Jason hadn't let go of me and teased. "I thought he was your precious little thing. You willing to let him get hurt now?" Even while holding me, Jason was just nonchalantly fiddling with my hearing aid. He just sneered. He needed to be put in his place for getting ideas. Besides, I'm not interested in playing house with a beta. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed. Jason wasn't there. Kyle was standing by my bedside. Seeing me awake, he walked over, his eyes full of contempt. "You're up? The boss told me to watch you. I don't know what you're being so dramatic about. I drank way more than you last night, and I'm perfectly fine today." He rolled his eyes at me. I propped myself up, shielding my eyes from the glaring sunlight. My mouth was dry. His voice was getting on my nerves, so I reached for the water cup on the nightstand. Before I could grab it, the door opened. Kyle, who had been sneering at me, rushed over, snatched the cup, and bumped into me as Jason walked in. He then grabbed my hand, used it to push himself away, and the cup fell to the floor, shattering into pieces. The sharp sound echoed through the room. That was the scene Jason walked in on. Kyle stood to the side, immediately bowing his head and starting to pick up the glass shards. His voice thick with grievance. "Leo, if you didn't want the water I got you, you could have just said so. There was no need for this. If you don't like it, I can get you another cup." Jason's leather shoes appeared in his line of sight. He acted surprised and shot up, forgetting about the glass in his hand. Squeezing his fist, he let out a pained grunt. "I'm sorry, Mr. Grant. Leo didn't want to see me. I shouldn't have come." Jason set a thermal container aside and glanced at me. I didn't look away, nor did I say anything. After a brief look, he turned to Kyle. "Let me see your hand." Kyle looked at me with downcast, submissive eyes, then lowered his head again without moving. Jason's tone grew cold. "What are you looking at him for? I'm your boss." Kyle mumbled a reply and slowly held out his hand. When he opened his palm, a bloody gash from the glass was visible. It looked alarming. Jason's expression hardened, his brow furrowed, and his jaw tensed. He immediately released a wave of calming pheromones, then turned and pulled Kyle out of the room. "Let's get that bandaged." Kyle resisted, trying to explain. "Mr. Grant, please don't blame Leo. I think he must have misunderstood what happened between us last night." "I can explain," I said. "Let's get it bandaged," Jason interrupted, stopping to look at him commandingly. Kyle whispered a soft "oh," and the two of them disappeared from the doorway. I sat on the bed for a long time until a doctor came in to do his rounds. Seeing the mess on the floor, he assumed the worst and spoke sternly. "What's this? Binge drinking and now a suicide attempt? And what's with the suppressants? Why are you hiding your Omega status? If that guy is such a scumbag that he won't be with an Omega, you should dump him." Stunned, I looked up, confused. A tall man stood before me. A mask covered most of his face, but the eyes behind his gold-rimmed glasses looked incredibly familiar. I couldn't place him. He noticed me staring and frowned. He walked over to my left side and poured me a new glass of water. "Drink. The symptoms you described are normal. We'll keep you for observation for another day. Your ears are still in a recovery phase. You need to avoid late nights and alcohol. Also, why didn't you come to the hospital when you had a high fever? Running a fever without a partner can be very dangerous." I took the cup and practically chugged the water down. The doctor pulled out a few tissues. "Slow down. No one's going to take it from you." I took them, embarrassed. "Thanks." I thought he would leave then, but he sat down in front of me. "You haven't answered my questions." I felt the doctor's questions were a bit intrusive, even nosy, but then I thought maybe it was just part of his job. I glanced up at him, then looked down again. "I have inhibitors. I just didn't have them with me. Is that an excuse? What if the fever had caused permanent damage? What if someone with bad intentions, he couldn't bring himself to finish?" Then lowered his voice. "Do you forget how your hearing was damaged in the first place?" I froze. How did he know my hearing was damaged by a high fever? I started to say, then noticed the name on his badge. Cole Evans. "Cole?" He stared at me without a word, his expression making me feel like an idiot. I felt a pang of guilt and didn't dare to look at him anymore. He was my college classmate. My upper bunkmate, in fact. In our dorm, everyone was a beta except for him, an S-class alpha, and me a fake beta. He was the first person to figure out my secret. I thought he would expose me, but he didn't. After all, none of our roommates were particularly fond of Omegas. But things got awkward between us around graduation. My diary was accidentally picked up by someone from the class next door. It was filled with my secret crush on Jason. The fact that I was in love with my own stepbrother blew up, and people started calling me disgusting and dirty. Everyone in my dorm avoided me except for Cole. He got my diary back for me. Later, during graduation photos, I planned to give him a gift to thank him. But as I approached him with the gift, I overheard him talking to a friend. See a stray dog getting kicked and not help? What kind of person does that? I lost the courage to go any further. I threw the gift in the trash, but somehow he found it anyway. He found me holding the gift with his name on it. Why did you throw this away? I just thanked him for getting my diary back and didn't explain. Later, I deleted all his contact information. 3 years had passed. Seeing him again was inevitably awkward. He took off his mask. You've got some nerve only recognizing me now. I quietly shifted a little farther away from him. Thank you for helping me again. It was probably the same as last time, I thought. A doctor's kindness. Before he could say anything, Jason and Kyle returned. Both of them froze when they saw us. Jason spoke first. Doctor, can he be discharged? Cole stood up, his presence sharp, his tone turning cold and hard. Not yet. He needs to be observed for 3 days. Your oh no, I quickly tugged on Cole's sleeve. He looked at me in surprise, then gritted his teeth and changed his sentence. If you have things to do, you can leave. He didn't even look at Jason, which seemed disrespectful to an outsider. Kyle immediately piped up. Doctor, our Mr. Grant is a very busy man. He's already pushed back an international conference for Leo. He didn't come all this way just to have you. Give him an attitude. And our Leo doesn't look that fragile, does he? Or did he pull some trick to make Mr. Grant feel sorry for him and get you to lie for him? Cole took 2 steps forward, his sharp gaze fixed on Kyle. Are you questioning my medical skills or my professional ethics? Kyle flinched under his stare and took 2 steps back, hiding behind Jason. Mr. Grant. Jason put a protective arm in front of him. Doctor, I know Leo's body best. He just had a bit too much to drink last night. I have a lot going on at the company, and I can't really manage without him. Is it possible for him to come back with me? I'll personally take care of him. Cole stepped back, positioning himself in front of me, his stance as unyielding as Jason's. No, he's my patient. From now on, I'm responsible for him. The 2 of them locked into a silent battle of wills. I clung to the mattress, trying to endure the pain. Beside them, Kyle was already leaning into Jason's arms, whining, Mr. Grant, I feel sick. Cole was the first to snap out of it and look back at me. Jason, with a cold look, slowly withdrew his oppressive pheromones and led Kyle out. I stared after them without a word. I never expected that when Cole said he'd be responsible, he meant he'd be staying the night to watch over me too. When I saw him walk in with a blanket, I sprayed a mouthful of water all over the bed. He quickly tossed the blanket onto the visitor's cot, grabbed some tissues and ran over to help me wipe up. Then he rushed to press the call button for a nurse to change the sheets. The nurse who came in kept glancing between me and him, giggling as she worked. She practically ran out of the room after Cole shot her a dark look and told her to hurry up and leave. Cole, I can handle this myself. You've worked all day. You should go home and rest. Cole paused from tucking me in. What? Are you worried about me? I was speechless and decided to just shut up. I didn't see the faint smile that touched his lips. Not long after I lay down, my phone rang. It was Jason. Be back at work tomorrow. His tone was non-negotiable. He was about to hang up, but I quickly cut in. I've already submitted my resignation to HR. You can approve it when you have time. Leo, he hissed, his voice a clear warning. I sighed quietly. Just as I was about to say something else, the phone was snatched from my hand. My patient needs to rest. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up. I sat up and stared at Cole. He hung up right in front of me, cutting off Jason's rage, then efficiently turned off the phone. Go to sleep. I was about to remind him he hadn't given my phone back, but he was already lying down on his own cot, eyes closed. I was a little annoyed but didn't want to argue, so I just turned my back to him. I lay awake for a long time, not because of Jason, but because of Cole. He had clearly looked down on me before, but now his behavior was the complete opposite. I didn't get it. A thought flickered in my mind, but I felt it was impossible. After all, someone in college had asked him if he liked men, and he'd said, "Am I crazy?" So I pushed the suspicion back down. I don't know how long it was before I fell asleep, but in my dreams, someone kept stroking my face. Couldn't get away. Then I felt a soft, cool touch on my lips. It was a gentle press that was gone in an instant, followed by touches on my forehead, my eyes, and finally my earlobe. I couldn't take it anymore and forced my eyes open, but there was nothing there. I turned over. Cole was still asleep next to me. I'd rarely seen him sleeping. Back in the dorm, he was usually the one waking me up. This was the first time I'd really seen him asleep. I looked at his flawless face and thought to myself, no wonder he was the most popular guy on campus. So many girls chased him back then, and 3 years later he was still just as handsome. What are you sighing about? His eyes were still closed. I jumped. You weren't asleep? Heard someone sighing and it woke me up. He suddenly opened his eyes, and we were inexplicably staring at each other. His deep eyes shone brightly in the moonlight. I couldn't help but stare for a few extra seconds. As I was lost in thought, he suddenly said, "Keep looking and I'll kiss you." Because of what he said last night, I couldn't bring myself to look Cole in the eye all morning. The man himself, however, acted as if nothing had happened. He was completely professional during his rounds. He gave me the usual medical advice, but at the end, he left a lunchbox. "Eat something. The hospital cafeteria food is terrible." He left after saying that. I was starving, so I opened the container and started eating. I was halfway through when Jason arrived. He walked in with a grim face and sat down in front of me. "How long are you going to keep up this tantrum?" I kept my head down and ate, saying nothing. He suddenly grabbed my hand, and the food scattered all over the floor. "Leo, have you had enough?" I took off my hearing aid. Even though I could hear a little now, taking it off meant I could hear less. Seeing my action, he laughed in fury. He grabbed my collar and forcibly tried to shove the hearing aid back into my ear. I pull it out, he'd push it in. "Have I spoiled you so much these past few years that you've forgotten who you are? You dare give me an attitude?" In a panic, I slapped him. When he couldn't get the hearing aid in, he started tearing at my clothes. "Fine, Leo. I'll do you right here. You asked for this. Let go of me. Jason, you bastard." He ripped off my hospital gown and pressed his lips on mine. When I dodged, he held my head still, pinning my hands above me. I saw my pants were about to come off and cursed him nonstop, but I finally stopped struggling when he pulled them down. The moment my tears started to fall, the door was violently thrown open from the outside. Cole's fist came flying, and Jason, unable to dodge, took 2 hard punches. I scrambled to pull the blanket over myself, shrinking into a corner. Cole looked like he wanted to hit him again, but seeing me, his eyes reddened, and he strode over. He pulled the blanket up to my chin and kept wiping my tears. "Don't cry, Leo, don't cry. I'm here." He pulled me into his arms, holding me tight. Jason, wiping blood from the corner of his mouth, sneered. "Leo, you're really something else, aren't you? Seducing someone everywhere you go?" He spat the words at me, and I trembled, clutching Cole's shirt. I couldn't say a word. I'd never seen Jason like this. He wasn't even this vicious when he found the rings. Today, he looked like he wanted to kill me. I was shivering uncontrollably, and Cole's eyes were filled with pain. "Leo? Leo, I'm here. Don't be afraid." I'd never heard his voice so gentle before. I couldn't help but start sobbing. He held me tighter. Soon, he called security. Jason still wanted to take me with him, but Cole wouldn't let him, so he finally gave up. "Leo, don't think you can get rid of me just because you found a new protector. Our relationship isn't something just anyone can break up." As he said the last sentence, he shot a venomous glare at Cole. Cole's large hand quickly moved to cover my eyes. As expected, Jason rejected my resignation and demanded I return to the company immediately. When Cole found out, he wouldn't let me go and took me straight to his place. "For now, you'll stay here with me." Cole brought me a fresh change of clothes, slippers, a toothbrush, and a cup, all of which looked like they had been prepared in advance. Seeing my stunned expression, he scratched the back of his neck. They were on a buy-one-get-one free sale at the supermarket. I stared at his calm back, completely baffled. I'd heard his family was very wealthy, with prominent parents. Why would he be buying discounted items at a supermarket? Though confused, I stayed. I really had nowhere else to go. When Kyle found out I had refused to return to the company, he started spamming his social feed with videos of himself and Jason at work events. He even posted a video of Jason taking a drink for him. "Mr. Grant is so manly. He took a drink for me. I'm so lucky." Jason had liked the post and even commented, "He's my person. Of course I have to help." Kyle quickly replied, "Does that mean Mr. Grant will only take drinks for me from now on? It's a deal then, no one else." It sounded like a pouty demand, but Jason didn't reply. I was about to click on the video when Cole suddenly came out of the bathroom. He was wearing only a towel, with water droplets still glistening on his chest and abs. Despite his pale complexion, his muscles were well-defined, a perfect example of looking slim in clothes but ripped without. His 8-pack was taut as he approached. I quickly put down my phone to hide my flustered state. He stopped right in front of me, his abs just half a fist's distance away. "Hair dryer. Give it to me." He said a few words, but I was still in a daze. He bent down and looked into my eyes. "Leo. Hair dryer. Give it to me." Oh, here." I grabbed the hair dryer from behind me and gave it to him. His hands were wet, and he was about to touch the plug. I rushed over and snatched it from him. "Your hands are wet. I'll do it." After I plugged it in, he started blow-drying his hair haphazardly, making a complete mess of it. Exasperated, I unplugged it and pushed him down onto the sofa. "You'll damage your hair like that. Let me do it." He sat obediently and let me take over. As I was drying his hair, I remembered how in college he was always so good at these things. His hair was always perfectly styled, and he would dry it meticulously, strand by strand. He was never this rough before. I remembered how he always smelled good when he walked past me. He still did now, but there was an added hint of unkemptness. Cole's posture grew straighter and straighter, like a model student. Couldn't help but chuckle. He whipped his head around, startling me, and the hair dryer almost fell. He caught it with lightning speed, but I stumbled forward and fell onto him. He held the hair dryer in one hand and me in the other. Realizing how strange our proximity was, I hastily pushed him away. "Sorry." Cole quickly unplugged the hair dryer and hurried into the bathroom. Before he went in, he awkwardly said, "Get some rest. And don't use those suppressants anymore." I paused for a second, then nodded. It wasn't until I woke up the next morning that I saw over a dozen missed calls on my phone. They were all from Jason. I ignored them and opened my messages. A voice message from Kyle immediately popped up. "Leo, where did you go? Mr. Grant was looking for you all night." If I remembered correctly, they were together last night. I frowned and told him it had nothing to do with me, then tried to hang up. But he started crying. "He has a stomach bleed. He's in the hospital and he keeps calling your name." I was stunned for a moment, but then I remembered what happened at the hospital the other day. My throat felt tight. Finally, I said, "It has nothing to do with me." Kyle immediately started cursing me out like a shrew. "Leo, how could you do this to Mr. Grant? He's been so good to you. You won't even visit him when he's sick? Do you have a conscience?" I cut the call before I could hear the rest. Opening my chat with Jason, I saw he'd sent several messages. Most of them were about how my tantrum had gone too far and how I'd regret it if I came crawling back to him. He must have been right there because at that moment, a new message came through. "Leo, you've got guts. Did you run off with that doctor? I knew you were this kind of person. Your mother was a bitch, and so are you. Don't come crying back to me later." His last message was a voice note. His voice was weak and strained. He sounded seriously ill. I didn't reply. Instead, I deleted and blocked him, erasing all his contact information. I had made enough mistakes over the years. It was time to stop. Cole normally only had an hour and a half for lunch, but he still rushed back from the hospital just to cook for me. I had a growing suspicion that he did have feelings for me, but I didn't dare think too deeply about it. After all, given how he saw me back then, he probably still saw me the same way now. He made me a nutritious meal that tasted amazing. I never knew he was such a good cook. Noticing I was eating distractedly, he waved a hand in front of my face. "What's wrong? Is it not good?" He picked a piece of vegetable from my bowl, tried it, and looked at me again. "Or is it not to your liking?" I put down my chopsticks and shook my head. "No, it's good. After I eat, I'm gonna head out. Thank you for everything these past few days." Cole's expression changed instantly. I couldn't tell if he was angry or something else, but it wasn't good. "Are you going back to him?" I blinked, then realized who he was talking about and slowly shook my head. "It's over between us." The atmosphere around Cole immediately brightened. He went back to eating. Then where will you go? Back to Austin? I don't think you have any relatives there. His words caught me off guard. Now that I thought about it, I really didn't have anywhere to go. But I had saved a good amount of money from my years with Jason. He paid me a salary every month, and I had enough to live on my own for at least 20 years. It wasn't that I had nowhere to go, I just needed to find a place. And my ID was still at Jason's house. I'll find a place to rent. Anyway, I won't bother you anymore. He placed some vegetables in my bowl. Don't worry about it. It's too quiet here anyway. You can stay, no rent. You can help me, he thought for a moment. Help me take care of a kitten. A colleague in my department just asked me about one today. I was about to refuse, but the mention of a kitten made my eyes light up. You're getting a kitten? He nodded. Yeah, I've wanted one for a while, but it's hard with my work schedule. But if you're leaving, then I won't get it. No, keep it. His expression softened. Okay. After lunch, as he was about to leave, I walked him to the door. Just as I was about to turn back, he grabbed my arm. Jason's in the hospital. Are you? I turned my head away. He has nothing to do with me. He suddenly reached out and stroked my head. I was so surprised I instinctively pulled back, but he just chuckled. Then wait for me at home, he paused. With my cat. But Cole didn't come back that night. There was an emergency surgery at the hospital. He called to tell me to make sure the door was locked. I hung up, thinking he was crazy. I wasn't a child. I knew who to let in and who to keep out. It wasn't until noon the next day that I understood what he meant. Somehow, Jason found Cole's apartment. Seeing his face on the video doorbell, I backed away in fear. Leo, I know you're in there. Open the door. His assistant stood behind him, and behind them was Kyle, his face a mask of jealousy and resentment. He rang the bell several times. When there was no response, he used his assistant's phone to call me. I rejected it and immediately dialed 911. The police arrived shortly after. Not only did Jason not leave, but he told them his younger brother had been tricked and was being held in this apartment. The police had no choice but to knock. Not wanting to cause trouble for Cole, I opened the door. When Jason saw me, he raised an eyebrow, his triumphant expression making me sick. But he quickly smelled something different on me and frowned. What's that smell on you? I had stopped taking my suppressants, so now I carried the natural scent of an omega. He narrowed his eyes, clearly furious, but there was also a faint flicker of excitement. Please show me your identification, the officer said to me coldly. I mumbled, unable to speak, because I hadn't gotten my ID back yet. As I hesitated, Jason stepped forward and handed over my ID card. Here's my brother's ID, officer. Mr. Song, your brother found you. If you're okay, please go home with him. It seems your brother is very worried about you. Jason sighed. All right, stop the tantrum. Come home with me. He leaned in and whispered in my ear, we'll settle this when we get back. I pushed his hand away and took my ID back from the officer. I'm sorry, officer, but he's not my brother. The police looked at us strangely. Jason, not wanting to make a bigger scene, came up with an excuse and smoothed things over. After the police left, I shut Cole's door. Just say what you have to say. Kyle, who had been silent, suddenly stepped forward. Leo, Mr. Grant has humbled himself to come find you. You should know when to quit. If you take it too far, Mr. Grant will lose his patience. I glared at him. What? Are you his new favorite? So eager to take my place? Then go for it. You don't need to come here to tell me. Kyle's eyes turned red with anger, and he shrank back without another word. It seemed Jason wasn't as fond of him as he appeared. If he truly intended to keep him, he wouldn't have remained so indifferent after hearing my words. Jason wasn't angry, just smiled faintly. I didn't know you could be so jealous, little brother. He reached out to touch my face, but I dodged. Don't touch me, Jason. There's nothing between us anymore. Jason's face darkened, his fingers slowly clenching into a fist. Leo, don't push your luck. It's the ring, right? I can wear it, but you have to come back with me. I thought of the ring I had thrown away and shook my head. I don't need it anymore. You should go. Jason grabbed my hand and started pulling me away. It's not up to you. Let him go. Cole had returned at some point. He looked exhausted from a long night, and he was carrying a cat carrier. He didn't look happy. The kitten inside was meowing in fear. Jason hated cats. He frowned instinctively at the sound. I pushed him away, and Cole was already by my side. "Let him go," he said, taking my hand. "Cole is... What do you think your family would say if they found out you were with this kind of person?" Cole held my hand and shielded me. "That's none of your business." Hearing this, Jason finally snapped. He pointed at me, his voice dripping with venom as he tore open my deepest wound. "He spent his 18th birthday in my bed. You want this kind of trash? Leo, once you're mine for life. You think you can have a good life after leaving me?" His words made my heart tremble. It was the day he found my diary. On my 18th birthday, he gave me a pair of sneakers, but then he accidentally saw my diary. His warm expression had instantly turned dark and vicious. That night, he had been insatiable, insane. He cursed me even as he couldn't stop himself from sinking into me. "So pathetic. Leo, you've liked me since you were 15. Huh? How did it feel watching me with other Omegas every day?" Sad? Regretful? He was in his rut that day. He threw away the inhibitors he was supposed to use and pinned me down. My body temperature plummeted, and I couldn't stop shivering. Cole shoved him away, grabbed his shirt collar, and warned, "Get out." He pulled me inside and shut the door. Cole didn't say a word to me. He walked straight to his room. I felt a wave of despair. I looked at the cat carrier on the sofa, and my vision blurred. I quickly packed my things and left. Cole probably didn't have the heart to ask me to leave, so he was just waiting for me to go on my own. I threw the cochlear implant. Jason had bought me into the trash and set off to find a place to rent. I had only gotten about half a mile from Cole's place when he suddenly appeared behind me. He was still in his bathrobe, with foam in his hair, panting heavily. His mouth was moving, his expression frantic. The surrounding noise was too loud. I couldn't make out what he was saying. Seeing my blank look, he pulled me into his arms. His lips were right next to my ear. "You scared me to death, Leo. Thank God you didn't get far." His voice was thick with emotion, a mix of a sob and raw fear. I heard it clearly, and it was real. Cole held my hand the entire way back. He didn't let go, even as every passerby gave us strange looks. We even ran into a female colleague from his department. The woman's face was a picture of shock. She pointed at him, speechless for a moment. "Dr. Evans, my partner is hard of hearing," Cole said calmly. He thought I didn't want him anymore. I tugged on his hand, trying to pull away. He turned and gave me a warning look, so I gave up. Back at the apartment, he silently took a new hearing aid out of a bag. After putting it on for me, he knelt down. "Why did you leave? Didn't we agree you'd help me take care of the kitten?" I adjusted the hearing aid. I thought you wanted me to leave and were too polite to say it." I laughed bitterly. After all, I'm so pathetic. My heat came without warning. I clung to him weakly. He asked me again and again who he was, and I answered him tirelessly. He released his pheromones, luring me closer, until I begged him to kiss me. He cupped the back of my neck and kissed me, dominant at first, but then gentler as he felt me yield. His wet kisses trailed from my lips down to my neck. A moment later, I felt a sharp sting on my neck and instinctively reached up to touch it. He caught my hand and bit it gently. "Punishment," he mumbled. He had marked me. "Cole." I had just said his name when he kissed me again. After a long moment, he stopped and said, "Call me that from now on. And don't you dare run away." He pressed his forehead against mine and let out a contented sigh. "Leo, I've been looking for you for so many years. Please don't run away again. Okay?" I was completely stunned. He liked me before? I settled into life at Cole's place. He insisted I rest for a month before going back to work. I took care of the kitten at home and he took care of us. I ended up getting a job at the local pet store. Jason never liked animals, so I never had the chance to have a pet. Now I was surrounded by them. 3 months passed before I heard any news about Jason. He had bought Kyle a 20,000 ring at an auction. Kyle had been showing it off on his social feed for days. Coworker showed me. I didn't have much of a reaction. Seeing that I wasn't jealous, my coworker lost interest and just made small talk. She was surprised to hear I was getting married and asked what my fiancé was like. I told her he's a very good person. I think he's loved me for many years. I don't want to let him down. Jason called me from someone else's phone. I thought it was a delivery driver and answered, only to hear that familiar voice. "Come get your junk out of my house. Just throw it away." I had already gotten my ID back. All that stuff was things he had bought for me. It was never really mine. Really? You don't want the ring either? Confused, I hung up. I'd thrown that ring away long ago. What was he talking about? The day Cole and I picked up our custom wedding bands from overseas, Jason showed up. He was still the same picture of an elite, arrogant and unyielding. He didn't lower himself even upon seeing me. He pulled a ring box out of his pocket. I had it remade. Put it on. And keep it on. Can you come back now? It's fine if you want to be with him. You'll get tired of playing around. You'll come back to me eventually. If you had just told me you were an Omega, I wouldn't have treated you like that. We can have a child. You can have anything you want. I had been holding Cole's hand. To show Jason my ring, I pulled my hand free. Cole wasn't angry. He just held up my hand for me. Leo only has one hand for a wedding ring. Jason stared, stunned, at the wedding band on my ring finger. I told Cole to go inside first. He looked at me with concern, but I gave him a reassuring glance and he left. It was time to settle things with Jason. Jason, it's really over between us. I smiled faintly. Honestly, I used to think I couldn't live without you. That's definitely what I thought when I was 18. I loved you so much back then. Even after everything you did to me, I still loved you. But that night I heard you. You really hate me, don't you? He knew which night I was talking about. The man who never deigned to explain himself instinctively tried to. That night I was drunk. It was just my pride talking. Have you seen me with anyone else all these years? He paused, thinking of Kyle. Kyle is just a secretary. You don't need to worry about him. You and I have always been the closest, Leo. Can you stop this now? For the first time, his tone softened. I was surprised for a moment, then laughed. So you do know how to be gentle. So it wasn't that he couldn't. He just didn't want to. His face darkened, but he didn't argue. Come back when you're done with your tantrum. I didn't throw your things away. He looked away from me. I nodded. Sorry, but my husband is waiting for me at home. We're legally married overseas. Leo, he called out as I turned to leave. We're the closest people to each other. Closest? But you don't love me. I turned back and said it plainly. No, I don't not. He couldn't get the words out. I didn't wait to hear them. I turned and went inside. My cat and my husband were waiting for me behind the door. After that day, Jason started taking Kyle with him everywhere. But on his own hand, he wore the ring I had originally designed. The one he'd bought at auction was nowhere to be seen on Kyle's hand. Heard he wanted the one Jason was wearing, an identical one, but Jason wouldn't give it to him. So he got mad and threw the other ring away. My coworker, now my good friend and gossip buddy, told me. Then what? I asked. Jason didn't coddle him. He took the ring back. Now Kyle is kissing up to him, trying to get it back. But Jason couldn't care less. He really couldn't care less about Kyle, because he was too busy showing up at my and Cole's front door from time to time. Cole saw me grinning at my phone and leaned over. What are you looking at? I showed him the screen. He smiled and asked, a 20,000 ring. You seem very interested in that. I blinked. Not really. 20,000 wasn't cheap, but I wasn't that interested. Then he suddenly pulled an exquisite ring box from his pocket. Well, how about a 50,000 one? Interested in that? Before I could react, he had already slipped the ring onto my finger. He gently flicked my forehead. Next time, don't just listen to half a sentence. You made me search for you for so long. My heart felt full to bursting. Oh, how was I supposed to know you were talking about the stray dogs on campus? Couldn't you have just been direct back then? I was afraid of scaring you. Who knew you'd run away anyway? He sounded a little hurt. I hugged him and sighed. I'm back now. I'm not running anymore.